On this super review, let's take a look at the TFZ T2 Galaxy. All right, so what we got here is another in-ear monitor, and I know two things about this. Number one, this is the most requested review that I have in the comments of this channel. Number two, the name of this company is the FRAGRANT Zither, which I just find that kind of pleasant, right? I don't know, it just kind of, it sounds a little bit like, I don't know, like walking through a garden and you got the FRAGRANT Zither. And what is a zither? I'm sure it's a thing. It's not a word I know, but what I do know is this thing looks cool. So the T2 Galaxy is a $60 in-ear monitor. Not the cheapest, but also still well under $100, right? So I think this thing is playing in the market of like the Tin Hi-Fi T2, Tin Hi-Fi T3, KZ AS10, and right around in that range, right? And in my opinion, look, that's a really competitive price range where there's some really good stuff that punches way above its weight class. The T2 Galaxy, I haven't listened to it yet. I don't know, is this thing gonna stand up? So let's go and open it up. We'll find out what we get inside the box of the T2 Galaxy. Then I'll give it a listening test, run it against my reference library of music, and compare this to some of those other, $50 to $60 to $70 in-ear monitors. And we'll find out, how does this thing stack up and what kind of person is this thing for? How was that for a spin? Not bad, huh? All right, so we got the TFZ, the FRAGRANT Zither T2 Galaxy in-ear monitors sitting here in a box. And first off the bat, this is a very interesting looking box. This looks different than most IEM boxes do, right? Now let's see what we can find out about these things with a quick tour of the box. We can tell right here we've got a box of accessories. We've got a pretty cool looking logo. Is that what a Zither is? On the back here, some information about where it's manufactured. We got a website, an email address, and a phone number. I don't want to call them. All right, so no information about it. What I could tell about it from the website, or I guess it was the Amazon listing, is that I believe this thing is using a dynamic driver. This is a dynamic driver headphone that they describe as dual magnetic circuit 2 divided frequency graphene units. That makes sense to you? Got it? It didn't make any sense to me, but that's okay. They did also say that everything is wonderful. That sentence exists in their Amazon listing. Everything is wonderful. Which you kind of expect from a company called the FRAGRANT Zither, right? So yeah, we're not gonna find anything else about this, so let's just go ahead and crack it open and find out what's inside. All right, so we got the TFZ Galaxy T2 Galaxy FRAGRANT Zither, some combination of those utterances. We've got that completely unboxed, and this is what you get, which is actually a pretty big spread. Okay, that's not anything of use, it's just kind of fancy looking. But what you do get is, you get a hair clip. I don't know. I've got a number of headphones. Most of them don't come with this sort of clip, but I do have a number that come with a little shirt clip like this, and I don't really see any use for it, but if you need it, I guess it's better to have it than not. All right, you do also get a set of instructions, which are sweet and minimal, but it does seem that this manual is made for basically every headphone that they've got. So they've got one page dedicated to each headphone. T2 Galaxy driver, 12mm double magnetic circuit graphene driver, impedance of 16 ohms, sensitivity of 110 decibels. Frequency response of 5 hertz to 40 kilohertz. They do throw in this little carrying pouch, which I think just feels kind of god awful, frankly. There's no way I'm gonna use that. But it does come with a card with a bunch of different ear tips on it. And I appreciate this distribution of the ear tips. So it comes with 6 sets of ear tips on this card, including 3 sets of small bore and 3 sets of large bore ear tips. Interestingly, it does also come with, it looks like a set of medium, oh, are these the same? It does of course come with a cable, and this cable is, I'll be frank, this is not my favorite cable. This is sort of a rubbery wound style that kind of reminds me of the cable that I got with the Eco OH1. The wind on this is a little bit tighter, so I'm not gonna have some of the problems I had with the Eco OH1, but it is worth calling out that it is not the nicest cable, but it's also not the worst. It does have, thankfully, preformed ear hooks. There's no memory wires in here, and that's what I like to see. You've got this part on the outside, which is gonna show fingerprints, but I don't think that's a big deal. Oh, and the connector is a 2-pin connector, but it's got like this nice shielded, this is exactly the kind of 2-pin connector I like the best personally. That said, what's really gonna matter is what does this thing sound like? What does this thing like to live with? So without further ado, I'm gonna go ahead and take this out, hook it up to my Walkman, run against my reference library music, some De La Soul, some Michael Jackson, some FKJ, the usual stuff. And then I'll come back and I'll let you know, what do I think of the TFZ T2 Galaxy? All right, fam, let's talk about the TFZ T2 Galaxy, which is an earphone that costs around 70 bucks. And frankly, I think it's pretty good. I think a lot of people are really gonna like this thing. I do have one problem with it, but we'll get into that. Let's start with the build quality of this earphone, which is quite nice. I think for $70, it's about what you would expect, right? So you've got these acrylic plastic shells that I think are pretty handsome. That's not the most handsome, you know, something like the 10 Hertz P4 Pro. I think that's what I want an acrylic headphone to look like, or a resin headphone, or whatever you want to call that plastic. This is pretty attractive, not quite as attractive, but this is also 70 bucks. The other half of what makes the T2 Galaxy really attractive is the metal shell on the outside, or like this metal plate. And you've got a Z on one side, and you've got this, I don't know, you've got this weird symbol. Maybe that's what a zither is. But I don't know, just overall, I think a really handsome looking headphone. This green and silver colorway, I think is pretty attractive, although there is also an option for a purple and gold one that I think looks even better. I didn't get it because I just recently got the KZ ZSNs in purple. Also a pretty good looking headphone, but I think this looks quite a bit better. Also compared to the KZ ZSN, these buds are actually quite a bit smaller. These things fit pretty well. I think they're gonna fit most people's ears. If I had any complaint with the fit, it's just that I feel like it's a little bit of a shallow fit, and so it doesn't feel super secure. Now, that may just be because I was recently listening to things like the DM6, which basically just, it embeds itself in your ear, and these things, they don't, but they fit, I think, reasonably comfortably, just not super secure. Now we can get into talking about this cable, which I think is a pretty decent cable. It's a little rubbery compared to, you know, some other nicer cables that you're gonna get with like the Tin Hi-Fi T3. They just kind of set the bar really high now for a cable, and this is not as good as that cable, but I do like this cable generally more than the average KZ cable. The KZ ZSN cable, I might like a little bit more, just looks a little bit more handsome, but functionally, look, this is a really nice cable. You get up here to these preformed hooks, and this is maybe where I have one minor nitpick about the cable, maybe 2 minor nitpicks, but only one that I actually really care about. The one that I don't care about, and I'm not gonna ever repeat after I say it now. In fact, I probably shouldn't even be telling you this, but so I actually do like that the 2-pin cable up here is covered in this little plastic shroud, but because of the way it fits, like it fits so tightly and perfectly, it actually makes it so that it's harder to find other 2-pin cables that'll fit this. That's a pretty small complaint. I mean, any 2-pin cable is gonna fit it, but any 2-pin cable with a shroud like this is gonna be a little bit more particular. Not a big complaint. The other minor complaint that I probably will repeat some other time, because I do think it's a little bit less minor, is that these hooks, I think, are just a little bit long. you can see that the preformed hook comes all the way down here. And the effect of that is that when you're wearing them, I feel like this plastic hook, this formed plastic, it just kind of sticks out a little bit. And it also, and this is the bigger issue for me, and again, this is actually still a really minor issue, but the bigger issue for me is that when I unwind these things very often, like it just kind of winds itself up like that. So when I'm pulling them out of storage and I'm trying to put them on my ears, it's just an extra little step. Pretty minor issue. The one issue with build quality that I have with this headphone that I think it's beyond minor, it's a pretty significant issue for me, is that there's pretty significant driver flex on the T2 Galaxy. So when you're putting this thing in your ear, that air pressure that you're creating inside the earphone, it causes the dynamic driver inside of it to crinkle a little bit. And maybe that won't bother you so much, but I have so many earphones that, to me, like that, it just seems like a byproduct of a cheaper earphone. And this thing's 70 bucks, so it's not really that cheap. I wish it didn't do that. That is a significant issue that I have with the build. But then we get into the sound quality, and I don't really have any significant issues with the sound quality of this thing because this is a great sounding headphone that I think the sound signature on this thing is almost exactly what most people are looking for. Maybe if you're like an audiophile with a very particular sound signature in mind, I can't guarantee you're gonna like this, but if you're just a casual listener out there and you're looking at a lot of like KZ earphones, you're like, I wanna up my game, I do have a feeling that the sound of this is exactly what you're looking for. So the way I would describe the sound of the T2 Galaxy is just kind of big, fun, bassy, bouncy. It's a pretty typical V-shaped sound signature with elevated bass and actually really nice treble. I think the peak in this is probably in like the upper mid-range, which just means that, like vocals and stuff are gonna sound, or especially female vocals are gonna sound nice and forward. Guitar riffs and stuff like that, and trumpets are gonna sound pretty good. But really it is all about the bass on this thing, and it's good bass. Like it's a nice big bass without feeling overly boomy and crowded. And I think that it executes that especially well because of the soundstage in this. The separation and the instrumentation is really pretty remarkable for a $70 headphone. It kind of reminds me a lot of the Mi Audio M6 Pro 2nd generation, which is a terrible name. You should forget that right now. Good headphone, terrible name. This kind of reminds me of that headphone a lot, in that it's just got this really nice wide sounding soundstage with an elevated bass that is powerful, but not overwhelming. And again, like the word bouncy is what comes to mind. Like it's just got this boing to it that it makes it really fun. It's maybe not a ton of texture in the bass like you might get with a different type of sound, but just in terms of overall enjoyment, look, this thing's doing a lot right. Also worth calling out is the T2 Galaxy is a pretty sensitive headphone. So if you're playing this off a source that's not particularly powerful, these things are gonna get plenty loud. It does also mean that if you're playing these off a source that's not super clean, like maybe a lot of cheaper phones, you might get some pretty significant hiss coming through these. Maybe significance a little bit overstated, but they do hiss a little bit, especially as you get these things into upper volumes. Now, when you're listening to music, you're not going to hear that hiss, and I'm probably overstating the impact of that hiss, but it's just something to keep in mind. I think the bigger difference that most people are going to notice is that this headphone just gets louder than most in-ear monitors. And I think that's generally a pretty good thing. Just overall, I would say this is a very, very engaging headphone that could be, you might construe it as a little bit actually overstimulating because of that wide soundstage and that bass bounce, and you still got pretty strong treble presence there. It can be a little bit fatiguing, especially at high volumes. And again, this thing wants to be at high volumes. So it's a very fun listen, but it can be a little over engaging depending on your scenario, right? If you're sitting around the office, maybe not the best unless you're really bored. But if you just want to kick back and relax, this is not the most relaxing headphone. That said, that's not a bad thing. That just kind of depends on your personal situation and your personal preferences. So if I were to rate the TFZ T2 Galaxy out of 5 stars, I'd give this thing a solid 4 stars out of 5. I think the build, the aesthetic of this headphone is really, really quite good. For 70 bucks, this is doing a great job. I think the sound, super fun, super fun. A lot of people are gonna really like the way this thing sounds, and I like the way it sounds. Like this thing complements a lot of music because of how just that stage and that bass. My one complaint with it, the reason that I'm deducting a star from it, is that driver flex, which it's a bummer on a $70 headphone to have that. I don't know, it makes it feel a little bit cheaper than it is. And is that a big deal to you? I don't know. You get really nice sound that, you know, the next closest thing that I can think of to this in terms of sound is the Mi Audio M6 Pro, which is actually cheaper, but the cable that thing comes with just stinks. So if I were choosing between this and the Mi Audio, I think I like the sound on the Mi Audio a little bit better and the fit, but this thing does look a lot nicer and this cable is much nicer. Anyway, if you're interested in checking out the TFZ T2 Galaxy, of course, I've got links in the description down below. While you're down there, you can hit the like button for the video if you liked it. You can subscribe to the channel, and then I'll see you in the next super review.